everyone, and welcome to a brand new spoiler review episode for The Penguin, brought to you on this special episode of the Geek Bites, brought to you by the
Geek
Buddies.
Hey! Hey, what are we going to do over here? I got to go talk to the Falcones. Hey!
Offensive.
and he didn't get cast. That's the shocking part of it all.
Guys, I sent my self tape in and I never heard. I think they must have not have seen it. I thought I really did it. I thought I really was channeling a Gotham crime boss. But I guess I need some work.
You were channeling something.
Listen, Luca Falcone, the actor's name is Scott Cohen. That doesn't sound very Italian to me. So you probably had a shot. You probably had a shot, Michael. I'll tell you. I'll put it on the table. I tell you.
First crime boss to have a bar mitzvah. It's great.
All right, we're jumping into episode 2. It's called The Inside Man or Inside Man here. This one's directed by Craig Zobel, who some of you may remember from directing The Hunt, which I thought was a quietly misunderstood and damn good movie with Patty Gilpin there that I thought was a really fun watch for those of you who haven't seen it. So I was excited to see what he would do with this episode. And this one is not as fast-paced or as maybe as gripping as the first episode, but there was a lot here within this episode that did a lot of character work for Oz and Sofia Falcone that I thought was a fun to get into and explore. And I thought the writing here was really well done, and some of the acting, of course, was off the charts and how good it is. So a furtherance of what's going on here with Oz making his moves to take control of the Falcone Empire, and now possibly Sofia helping him without knowing she's helping him to essentially take over the Falcone Empire down the road. We shall see. Michael, your overall thoughts here on this particular episode of The Penguin?
I mean, I think this show's great.
Yeah,
I'm gonna less. I thought two things specifically that are my opening thoughts on the show. The first one being, it is absolutely fascinating to be watching The Penguin at the same time as we're all watching Agatha All Along, because you could not have two shows about villains in their respective universes be tonally more different. Like we are so wildly different, and I'm enjoying both of them so much that it's like you get a little bit of whiplash going from the Witch's Road to Gotham post the Riddler's flood, and you're like, wow. But this is where I hope things continue to go. I mean, Agatha is so different from Marvel, from a lot of their past TV shows, just tonally, and Penguin is just so moody, has so much more in common with The Sopranos and the Godfather movies than it does with a lot of Batman, with it Batman Forever or Batman and Robin. And so it's really, really exciting. And the other thing I thought a lot about this episode was the argument, Johnny, that you and I got into last week about whether or not Oz is a genius who's thinking 10 steps ahead of everybody or is barely treading water. And I think with this episode, we both are a little bit right. Like, he clearly does have a plan. Yeah. Like, he is trying to make his moves, and he is doing some very smart things and planning ahead, but 95% of the time they go wrong. Yeah. And then watching him scramble, to me, was one of the greatest parts of this episode.
Yeah.
Like, the constant scramble when his plan at least 3 different times went to shit, and watching him sort of switch gears and the strategies he uses and just barely come out on top by the end, I thought was really, really fascinating as a character study, but also just really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it on the head there for sure. And that's what I enjoy about the overall approach they've taken to this show. It's very similar to Yojimbo. It's very similar to Fistful of Dollars. It's one guy in the middle between two crime families trying to come out on top by the end and turning them on each other. So it's going to be fascinating as this goes forward to see where it ends up by the time we're done with the series. Shannon, what did you think of this particular episode? Did you like this episode? Did it work for you, or did you have some reservations about it by the end?
No, I would say 99.9% of the series, this episode, I was 100% in. I mean, even though it wasn't quite as fast paced as the first one, I still thought I was still very, very engaged. And to what Vogel already said, about the differences between something like Agatha All Along and The Penguin. I actually watched the episode on a plane last night. Like, we were coming back from a weekend in Sedona. And as I was watching it, I was like, I did not read these reviews, but I know the reviews had been talked about that The Penguin seemed like the type of thing that is ashamed of it being a comic book. Like, it's so grounded. It's so removed from what the comic books have historically portrayed. And I think that criticism is just ridiculous because I'm like, the advantage of us having so much superhero programming, there's room for everything. And Act all along is very much its own thing. Even within the realm of the MCU, it is very much its own thing. Yeah. And the one is very much its own thing. I mean, you look at the world of the Batman that Matt Reeves created and how it is an even more pared down version of what Christopher Nolan did initially. And then you look at the Penguin and it's even more pared down from that. And when you have good storytellers with good performers, with good writing, I'm loving the show. The only issue that I have with this episode is just with the casting of Theo Rossi, because I think he's a little hit and miss because he plays the psychiatrist at the beginning. I have seen him in things where I really liked him, and I've seen him in things and I'm like, not quite checking the box for me. And I'm basing this off of one scene, but it's kind of like, oh, okay. So we'll see what happens. But Colin Farrell, Cristin Milioti, Deirdre O'Connell, everyone is fantastic. And I love the relationship between Oz and his mom. Like, it is so unique because I don't think they're in any way trying to redeem him, but they're also saying that this is not a binary world of black and white. Like, this is a very, very gray world.
Yeah.
Well, also, as sweet as he is with his mom, I mean, she constantly tells him he's a piece of shit.
Yes.
Yeah. But again, as I said in the last episode, it feels like generational trauma being passed on because even later when Oz and Victor are at that gravesite, that's the most toxic codependent relationship you can establish. A man in power taking a kid who's lost everything, who's probably has low self-esteem, doesn't know where he's going in his life, is lost, and manipulating him to try to turn him into essentially someone to do everything for him. And so you see that being passed on from his mom to Oz, and Oz is passing it on to Victor, but I don't think Victor is going to fall into the same trap that Oz has fallen into by the end of this relationship. I'm just thinking. Yeah, I like that.
I think Vic's going to fall. It might be into a shallow grave.
Or a superhero outfit, I feel like. But yes, in my opinion, I thought this episode was a lot of fun. You know, I think having read the comics and knowing the world of the comics and the detective stuff and Batman stuff, we know that there's always a little mix of camp with high stakes stuff and drama and tension. And certainly we saw someone getting knifed to death full on in this particular episode. So there's always that balance when you're reading DC Comics, especially in the world of Batman. And I think the show is doing a great job of capturing that and making it work for non-comic book lovers and comic book lovers alike.
And just really quick on the whole, it's ashamed of being a comic book criticism. These are people who haven't read a Batman comic.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, Batman as a genre of comic has become, I mean, yes, we know Batman has these super colorful villains. Batman is the world's greatest detective. Batman's in the Justice League. But stories like what they're pulling from, most particularly the Long Halloween and Dark Victory, are straight up mafia families. Yeah. Yes, like there's more of the colorful villain. I mean, you know, Alberto is the holiday killer in the first one, and then Sofia is the hangman in the second one. But I mean, so much of the references they're making, even the fact that Victor's from Crown Point, which is like in the comics the worst neighborhood in Gotham. Like, I just think that they're taking the part of the Batman comics that really leaned into crime dramas and mafia movies and all of those things and put them in Gotham City, and they're running with that. And so if you're a fan of that part of Batman, this is a very rich comic book world, even if it isn't a comic book world that has the Joker and Catwoman and Scarecrow running around the rooftops of Gotham.
Right. Not just yet. Yeah, for sure. All right, the way we're going to do the review is I'm going to break it down into 3 separate sections. This last section is going to be the longest, so I'm just going to, preface the things that happen, and then we're going to talk about them. That's how this review is going to go. So let's jump into it. The episode opens with Sofia having a nightmare about Alberto being shot as he visits her in Arkham. She comes out of it, and we see that she's in a therapist meeting with her psychiatrist, Dr. Julian Rush, who may or may not be Hugo Strange. I saw some of that speculation on the internet. He tries to tell her that she's safe, and she says, "I'm not safe. I'm home," which is an interesting illusion there. Meanwhile, Oz visits Salvatore Maroni at Blackgate there with Maroni's wife, Nadia, played by the lovely Shora Gadashlu, who I've been such a fan of for years. There's a back and forth about Oz setting up Sal, but it didn't stop Sal from wearing the ring around Blackgate, so clearly he doesn't have too much of a problem with it. Oz offers to help the Maronis take down the Falcones, claiming he's got an in with the new boss, Luca, which Sal accepts, but he wants the drops as a guarantee. So Oz spills the beans on the Falcones' plans to move their drops operations to Robbinsville and offers to set it up so the Maronis can take the whole shipment just as long as they leave him alone in the follow car. But on the night of the setup, Falcone underboss Johnny Beatty, the great Michael Kelly, shows up and orders Oz to ride in the main truck with the drops. There's always those things you don't plan on. The Maronis show up, shoot the caravan up with Oz improvising and killing the Falcones' henchmen in the truck, but the driver is somehow miraculously still alive and shoots at Oz, but hits the Marconi's capo instead. So, Michael, I feel like it's a good place to stop after this action sequence. What do you think is opening here with Sofia and possibly Dr. Hugo Strange? The stuff with Sal and Oz, and then the big heist scene there in the episode.
Well, I loved opening on Sofia, and I thought that sequence just did a really great job of just like sort of packing in a lot of really important stuff, like not stuff that we didn't know, but just really honing in on like her brother visited her at Arkham.
Yep.
Like, even though this is all like in her mind and it's all mixed up, her brother visited her at Arkham. Her brother was there for her when the rest of her family wasn't, and he got shot. And she's traumatized about it. Like, boom, boom, boom. So I thought that was all interesting. I do not think that Julian Rush is Hugo Strange. I do not think that Julian Rush is Jonathan Crane. This is like one of those things, because I saw a lot of Scarecrow stuff too.
Really?
He's doing the EMDR. He's got a book on hypnosis and I'm like, guys, his name is Julian Rush. So his name is probably Julian Rush. He's not Hugo Strange.
All right.
He's not Jonathan Crane. If he was either of them, kind of to Shannon's point, I think there'd be a different actor sitting there right now. So that was just one of those things. I'm like, everybody just take a break. There are other people practicing psychiatry in Gotham aside from these two gentlemen. He was a little close to her. I don't know that if I was treating a serial killer, I would make those moves. I think that's not going to go well for him in the long run. Cristin Milioti is doing a great job of playing somebody who is trying very hard to not be a psychopath, but is clearly a psychopath.
Yeah.
Like, just like at every single stage, you're like, God, she's really trying to pull herself out of this, almost escape from this other persona in a very typically Batman way. And again, this is where I think if you're really watching it, you really get to the comic book underbelly. Like, so many Batman villains have a duality because Batman himself has a duality. There is Bruce, there is Batman, there is Harvey, there is Two-Face, there is Jonathan Crane, there is the Scarecrow, there is Sofia Falcone, and there is the Hangman. It is like a part of her that she is trying to bury down that is a little bit later in the episode quite literally trying to claw its way out of her.
Yeah.
And that is like some classic Batman shit. So that was great. And then going to Blackgate with Sal Maroni, this is what I'm talking about. So Penguin was shuffling in that last episode and ended up just barely surviving by pinning it on the Maronis, and then goes back to the Maronis where they fully know he pinned it on him and is like, yeah, but it looks pretty good for you. Am I right? Like, that is such a ballsy move. Works out for him. Then he's got this whole plan. Sounds super logical. I'm going to be in the follow car. Don't fuck with the follow car. And then gets tossed into the car and is like, fuck. And then ends up like shooting everybody, like it's just like, it's a free for all because he's got to like make it out of there, just barely makes it out. But now you've got this guy, the Maronis guy is shot. So it was a really fun sequence. Love that we just played a Frank Sinatra song over the entire thing. Again, feeling
No. It was Bobby Darin. Call me irresponsible. You youngins, I'm going to teach you all these voices, for God's sakes. You're driving me insane. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, you guys heard it from Grandpa. The not Frank Sinatra song. But just really, really thought it was like a really fun sequence. And again, like in other episodes, like this was the other thing that surprised me in a good way. In a lot of other TV shows that we watch, particularly the ones where we get really mad because it feels like they drag on forever, we have a plan, we're gonna take the drugs, you're gonna bring the cars in, you're gonna steal the drugs, would be 50 minutes of television.
Yeah.
Like we would have got, this would have been an entire episode about, we've got the thing and we've got the whatever. Like you could have done, in other episodes, they would have done an entire episode about that, an entire episode about Falcone's funeral, and then an entire episode about everyone back at the house after the funeral. And the fact that this episode went, yeah, okay, we got a plan for the drops, and literally 20 minutes into the episode, that's done, got fucked up, went to shit, Osmod his way out of it, and we kept going. I was like, this is a pace that I enjoy.
Yeah. Shannon, your thoughts on these opening 3 scenes we got here with Sofia in the psychiatrist's office, Sal and Oz, and the introduction of Nadia, and then boom, what we get here at the night of the heist.
I mean, the visuals of Arkham that, again, they established in the Batman, it's just a cold, unforgiving place. Like you see this neck cuff that she has on that's very kind of loosely fitting, but also it's not going over her head. It's just a scary, scary environment. And the moment that she sees Alberto and she puts her hand up to the glass and he puts his out and she sees the pinky is gone. The thing that happened in the first episode, and then how this gun kind of comes out of the shadows and shoots him from behind. I mean, the trauma that she is experiencing, not just from the death of her brother, but by the fact that she is this homicidal maniac. I mean, it's just really, really well done. Agreed with Vogel about the proximity of the therapist and the patient. This is an unconventional treatment, because in a normal session, I'm guessing that the therapist is not going to be clasping, embracing, holding on to the patient the way that he was. But again, I've always just been such a big fan of Cristin Milioti, and her getting this type of opportunity to be in a big show like this is just really, really great to see. Going over to the Oz side, again, like we can't say enough about the makeup and Colin Farrell's performance, but we're going to anyway, because it's just, he just vanishes into the role. And yes, you can put a lot of that on the makeup and the incredible prosthetics that he is wearing, but also just the physicality that he has with this role. I mean, you forget instantly that is Colin Farrell under all of that makeup. I mean, the voice and everything about it. This is such a, I know he probably was not a fan of wearing it by the end. But this is just such an amazing role for him. Yeah. And another thing about, Vogel was talking about the pace of TV. Something that I love about a show like this is highlighting someone like Michael Kelly. Mm-hmm. Like Michael Kelly is an actor that was in Man of Steel as one of the, reporters at the Daily Planet. And it wasn't a bad role, but it's not a splashy role. Like when you get those big summer movies, most of your ensemble, you want people to know who everyone is right off the bat. And so it's like you would recognize Michael Kelly, like, oh, I think I've seen that guy on TV. What a show like this gives is the showcase for what a talent this guy actually is, and knowing the dynamic that he has with Oz. Like Oz is on his heels with everybody, but Johnny Vitti is the guy that he wants because he's the next domino he has to knock over. Looking at just the sequence, like Oz, again, being on his heels, being like, okay, I can see the car is coming up. They're going to start shooting in a second. Where can I go? I can maybe go to that door. Maybe that door will save me. And then I was not expecting him. I wasn't expecting that driver to survive because it looked like he took a few bullets to the chest. Yeah. But then as Ervod opens the door and he sees, and you hear that, Oz, you traitor, bang. He kills the guys in the car. He kills the driver as they get out, and he sees Sofia's guy, Castillo, and shooting one of the Maronis guys. I mean, he is, I wouldn't say he's an improvisational master, but he is definitely always having to think on his feet. And again, Shura Agadashlu, as you already said, John, there is such a weight and a gravity. I mean, I think she's more recognizable than Michael Kelly, but she's also she's a performer that people have seen over the years that they maybe would not be able to pick her name out. But her voice is just so distinct. She has such a gravity to her performance. So watching her and Clancy Brown with Colin Farrell, this is just a showcase for tremendous acting, in my opinion.
Question. I'm trying to remember. Does he put Castillo in the front car? Is Castillo in the front car?
No, I think Castillo's in the back car, the follow car, which is why he's there waiting for him in the follow car when he jumps out.
I do think it's interesting. Like he had a prime opportunity right there. This is that Oz improvisation thing. Like Castillo's a problem. I mean, Castillo literally tried to kill him the last episode, and he had the perfect opportunity in that moment to shoot Castillo, but he didn't, and then used that to Sofia to say, "Hey, I saved your guy, even though he tried to kill me." And then does what he does at the end of the episode. But like, it's just, you see him in the moment sort of doing these instantaneous calculations of, is this the moment that I take this guy out, or do I help him and use that to my advantage? Like this constant sort of weighing his options is kind of the thing that I am constantly like, well, that's why you're never quite sure what he's going to do, because how is he using this in his brain?
Yeah. And to that, Mikey, when he says Castillo, the tone of his voice is he's about to shoot this guy. Yeah. But then he sees the Maronis guy is right there. And also the car is coming up. And it's just kind of like, I would love to kill this son of a bitch for what he did, but it's going to be the better play right now is to make it look like I saved him. Yeah. Like, fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, and again, he's playing both sides, killing both Falcone and Maronis men in where it suits him to do so, which I think is a great testament to his thinking, as you said, Michael, on his feet. Yeah, the opening scene, I think the opening scene is really interesting when you look at it psychologically. She's having this nightmare about Alberto. He's the only one, as you said, Michael, come to see her, but she can't touch him through the glass. She can't reach him, right? Getting shot from behind, that's the feeling that she couldn't do anything. She's able to kill all these people, but she can't kill the person who killed her brother. It must drive her insane, which is what the way she's reacting and the anger and whatever. And when she wakes out of it, it's a lot of inappropriate touching for a therapist. So we'll see where that all ends up. But this is smart to bring in someone like Nadia as a character. Of course, Shara Gadashlu is just great, but Nadia, because you need someone who is on the outside carrying out Maronis' plans. So bringing an actress like this, who can carry that kind of weight. People know her, I think, from The Expanse. She sets out there and she has a strong presence. So it's a smart way of extending Clancy Brown's presence, so to speak, in the show by having her carrying out his demands there from outside Blackgate, which I think is really, really smart. Yeah, and the way this whole thing was shot, the whole thing, the action sequence, so well done. So even with Shannon dad jokes there in the car, which I thought was hilarious, all of that worked out so well. And then him thinking on his feet to get out of the situation. Because you're right, Mike. He thinks on his feet in the moment and who he's going to use when. If it's not the right time, he doesn't do it. He waits for the right time because he can always do it when the time shows up, which is an interesting testament to this guy's intelligence.
One thing you just said really quick that just really stuck with me, as I'm really stuck on this whole thing because I've read the same thing Shannon has. This whole like, this isn't a comic book show, this is a show that's ashamed. Opening up and Shannon talked about it with Sofia Falcone with this gun coming out of the shadows, but then your point about her touching Alberto and being like how she's traumatized by the death of a family member, but she can't get to the person that killed that family member, and that drives her crazy. That's literally Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, exactly.
That's literally Batman. That's literally definitively what makes Batman Batman. Right. So again, this whole concept of like, this is like this in so many little ways, if you're really paying attention and you know the world of Batman and Gotham in so many little ways, like this is checking the boxes, even if it's not checking them in the bright, splashy way that some people think a comic book movie should. Right.
And you can compare what Sony is doing with their Spider-Verse without a Spider-Man and what DC is doing with a Batman-verse without their Batman, and you see what the difference is. Right, exactly.
Yeah, I'll take this over Craven in the jungle being like, spiders.
How does Tom Cruise do this? All right, let's move on to this section. Sofia, so later, Sofia walks in on Vidi and Oz battling over the attack, and she chimes in that they need to care about being humiliated and not what they just lost, and that there's a mole here. Vidi ridicules her, but Luca later pulls Sofia aside to basically say, let him handle it if it's true. When she walks out, Oz, who's been eavesdropping on this, is waiting for her and conveniently offers to help her. But just when we think she might accept it, she smartly rejects it because she may be crazy, but she ain't stupid, and puts him in the same basket with Vidi and Luca. So then we cut to Oz and Victor, who are walking and talking later about his plans. Victor curiously stays looking at a missing poster, which I don't know what that means, but Oz talks about how he first came to work for the Falcones, and working as a driver, does another one of his soliloquies that he loves to do throughout this whole series before Eve Carlo, who was played by Carmen Ejogo, and her fellow sex workers pay a visit. By the way, Carlo, last name of Clayface, don't know if there's a connection. Later, as Sofia is being driven around, we hear about her release from Arkham and that she murdered 7 women under the guise of the Hangman. She gets Detective Marcus Wise, who some of you who are comic lovers might know from the comics, to help her find the rat in exchange for the drops. That night, Oz is holding a party in his apartment with some of Falcone's men, while Victor ignores a concerned text from a girl named Graciela. So we will see what that plays out to. And Oz is introduces Victor to Roxy, played by Jesse Pinnock, and they talk about camming, which I'd never heard that term before until this show, and him being from Crown Point. No, I don't get involved in the stuff you get involved in, Michael. Then Oz and Eve have an exchange about the positions he's in and tells her not to worry. So, Shannon, your thoughts on these sections of the show here before we get into the big stuff at the end here.
I mean, with one of the Falcone kind of like, lower tier guys, as he's saying, this guy saved me, Oz saved Castillo just as Cristin Milioti is walking in. I mean, that's just that the slow loyalty that Oz is trying to get with Sofia, knowing that he is ultimately, there's no one he won't stab in the back to ascend to what he wants to ascend to. But the whole thing with Johnny Viti and Luca both going after Oz about, this is your fault. Like, this happened on your watch.
If you're operating.
Yep. And then Oz is correct.
Ish.
Well, I mean, him saying I didn't choose to move this. Like, so he actually is correct there. But the way that Sofia is the one, because again, knowing she's just lost a family member. She's lost her closest family member. She doesn't care about the money. She doesn't care about the drop. She cares about the fact that you are dismissing the fact that we lost people in our family. You care more about the money. And that's ultimately why she is going to want to go to that, want to become the boss. I love the guy playing Luca. I mean, I love the interaction that he had with Sofia about, like, yes, we're going to get this guy, the who, the when and the why, or the who and the when, or the when and the where. That's not your call. And that reply that she has, because you're the boss. I mean, it's just so, again, it's the sparks falling next to the barrels of gunpowder. Like, you're waiting for something to just explode. And Oz is, like, obviously we know he's full of shit.
Yeah.
But he is very convincing. Like, when he says, Sofia, you should be the one making the calls. You should be the boss. And even though they all think he's full of shit too, there is something that's like, there's something about, there is an earnestness in what you're saying. And that's why he is so good at what he does. The whole thing with him and Vic with the cilantro, I thought that was such an unnecessary, but such a fun little bit to add about the fact that he doesn't like cilantro. Vic then has to go in versus going and getting more tacos. He's like, no, you go in by hand and take out all this cilantro. I don't like cilantro either. I'd much rather eat the cilantro than have a stranger take the cilantro out of the taco for me personally. But also seeing the interaction that he then has with Roxy. And Michael, do you work in cake? You ever work in cake?
Listen, man.
I've
done a lot of things.
That's right. Ew.
But just seeing the way that Rhenzy Feliz plays that stutter that Vic has. I mean, that's the type of thing that is very easy as an actor to overplay, because you want to make sure that the audience gets that I have this condition. But he plays it so subtly until certain moments, like when he's talking about his home, when he's talking about Crown Point and the struggle he has to get that out. And then that last scene with Oz and his, I can't remember her name, the blonde.
Eve. Yeah. Eve
Carlo. The whole thing that she has kind of figured out, like, this is why you wanted the alibi. Like, you are actually endangering me right now. You're endangering me and my girls. And her saying that, Viti's untouchable, and Oz says no one is untouchable. She's like, so that includes you. I mean, that's just really great writing.
Yeah. And that's Carmen Ejogo, who, if you guys don't know, she's been in a number of things recently, including, of course, Fantastic Beasts. She plays Serafina Pickery there in the Fantastic Beasts series. She was in Your Honor. She's been in a number of things. Really damn good actress. So it's great to see her being part of this, of course. And in Selma, if you guys saw Selma, she played Coretta Scott King in that movie there with David Oyelowo as Martin. Oyelowo as Martin. So it's really good stuff. Mike, your thoughts on these scenes here as we're leading into the big confrontation that's going to happen here at the Falcones estate?
Yeah, I mean, like, we talk a lot about Sofia being, crazy because she just got out of Arkham. But the other thing about Sofia is that she is a little bit smarter than the dudes in the room.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like she's the one that comes in as like, guys, there's a mole. Someone is feeding them information, which is correct. It's Oz. But like these guys are so focused on laying the blame at Oz. The Maronis are coming after us. We lost all this money. And they're not, they make it like Oz says this about Luca a couple times, that he's so cautious compared to Carmine, that he's always looking both ways before he makes a move. He doesn't go after things. And so there is this idea that like Sofia is not wrong. She and Oz are playing this cat and mouse game that she's not aware of, but she's so close. She was the one that came right in at the beginning and was like, Oz killed my brother. And he barely slid out of that. And then she comes in and she's like, somebody fed them this information. Again, Oz. And he's always just slipping out of it, which I think is really interesting. The other piece, about Oz's sincerity, and Johnny, you referred to his soliloquies. And I think this is one of the things that makes this version of him such a rich character, which is he constantly, not necessarily in this Sofia scene, although he does have that earnestness, but then later at the funeral, like he does reveal very personal information about himself that is at least partially true.
Yes. There's always
like not full, like there's always like, but like with Victor, he does it. With Sofia, he does it. When he's trying to reel you in, he does this thing where he opens himself up just enough to give you a story where you're like, fuck, this guy's really telling me something true. And then he kind of cuts it off, or he tweaks it a little bit, or he wraps a bow on it that's not exactly honest, but he does use sincerity in his deception, which is, I think, what makes him such a good liar, which I think is really, really fascinating. Johnny, you mentioned Victor looking at the missing signs. Look, he lives in Crown Point. Matt Reeves has not made a secret that he wants this version of the Batman story to be about class disparity. And what the Riddler did devastated the poor areas of Gotham. And there is no area of Gotham that is poorer than Crown Point. Most of the people that Victor knows are missing right now. Like, that's where this whole Graciela thing is going to be interesting. So who is still around? Because right now we know very little of Victor's life, aside from the fact that, he was a victim of the flood. So I do think looking at those missing signs was is there anybody I know up there?
Yeah.
And in fact, when they're in Oz's apartment, and all of is this Clayface? Is this the Riddler? Is this so-and-so? Is this so-and-so? I'm like, no. But the one thing that I haven't really seen many people make a point of, and I think this is a big indication of where the movies are going, is it Roxy, the one who does the cam stuff? Roxy says, oh fuck, you're from Crown Point. I heard that was a no man's land. No Man's Land is a year-long arc in the Batman comics in 1999 where there was a giant earthquake that devastated Gotham, and it turned the city into a war zone, and crime was on the rise, and all of the villains went crazy, and it was where they put Harley Quinn into the comic books because she escaped from Arkham Asylum during the earthquake. So when you refer to something, a giant tragedy of Gotham City, as a no man's land, that's a pretty good indication of where Matt Reeves is heading with the series. I also just really low-key, I think it's a good detail that Oz, after this devastating attack from the Maronis that he caused, invited the surviving guys over and said, guys, we survived the fucking Maronis. They tried to take us out. And I'm like, this motherfucker, I got you guys some hookers. Everybody have a good time. Which was really fascinating. And then even his whole conversation in his bedroom where she is like, you killed Alberto. I'm the alibi. He just, hey, I got you. This is going to be great. He never admits it. Like, she's like, say something. He's like, what do you want me to say? He never specifically says, you are correct, I did kill Alberto, because he's not going to admit it. But just watching him sort of dance around everything and then give her a shit ton of money the next morning, which is more than she needed, to just be like, hey, I got you. Like he is dancing between the raindrops of death right now and just barely surviving
every single time. You're right about that. Yeah, and I like these scenes because again, this Victor Oz relationship to me is the thing that I'm really gravitating to, because it's like this little subtle commentary going on about being in these toxic codependent relationships, right? Here's Victor looking at a missing poster. Instead of Oz understanding why he's looking at the poster or asking him, he's like, pay attention. I got a story to tell you about me. I got a story to tell you about me and my life and what happened with me. And so he cares almost nothing for Victor. And this is how Oz is built. He will kill Victor at any moment if he wants to, right? So it's always about how everyone can serve Oz. And this is where the undercurrent goes on. And Michael, you said this earlier, the Sopranos, a Boardwalk Empire-ish vibe of this is very clear in those moments. And we'll get to the funeral or the grave scene in a second, but like this is where you see that they're smart in how they approach it. And HBO has experience doing this, obviously, with The Sopranos. The second you start to like Oz, there's always something that comes through that makes you go, oh, yeah, that's right. This guy is actually a fucking criminal and he's an asshole. I shouldn't 100% like this guy. So I love that they have those little moments throughout this episode as well with him. And the same thing with Eve, the back and forth with Eve. Like he basically framed Eve to be his accessory for him based on their relationship in the past. But if he has to kill Eve, he'll kill Eve. And that's the thing about everybody that's involved with him and making it really clear. So in a way, him and Sofia are very similar in interesting ways. And so we will see how their relationship goes forward as we see by the end. And also Detective Marcus Wise. I mean, of course, you can throw a stone and hit a corrupt cop in Gotham, for God's sakes, at this time. So
the speed with which that man puts those drops in his eyes. Like they hand him, like when you want to show someone as an addict, like you're like, hey, we know you got a thing for drops here, hands it to him, and the way she looks him and she goes,
yeah,
do you want to do it now? And he just ends up boop 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 boop. I'm like, God damn, those drops must be something.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then the other side we'll get to the rest of the episode here right after this.
Do 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 do. Do 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 do.
Is that Sinatra?
That's Bobby there. All right. The next morning, Sofia wakes up in a closet from another nightmare, discovers blood under her fingernails, scratches on her neck. Meanwhile, Oz visits his mother, who has been found wandering in the neighborhoods by the Latino landlord there, who he pays off to keep watching her. And there's a moment there where the Latino guy says to Victor, con cuidado. So be careful with this guy. You know, Latinos understand Latinos when we're in these situations. Oz calms down his mom by playing Dinah Washington, a jazz record. They dance, but Victor reminds Oz that he's late for the funeral, for Alberto's funeral. So as he's walking out, though, his mom leaves him with this doozy. If my son is a nothing, what am I? Jesus Christ. So anyway, Oz arrives late to the funeral, which is being swarmed by protesters, finds Sofia, and goes into another one of his soliloquies mixed with truth and fiction about the death of his brothers and how his mom eventually dealt with it a month later by going to a jazz club with him and dancing all night long. Basically, he's saying you need to dance out your pain, in essence, and move on with your life instead of wallowing in the grief. He also reveals that his mom is dead, which is an interesting part of this whole thing. Sofia's bodyguard, Castillo, pulls her away, saying that Detective Marcus Wise has some more information on this, and Oz gets a mysterious text that says, we need to talk. This is essentially Nadia. He goes to meet with Nadia. They are going to kill him because they think he turned on them and they want him to get to Luca. But he has these pictures of Vidi having sex with Luca's wife. Meanwhile, at the Falcone estate, Marcus reveals that he's kidnapped the Maronis capo, who Shannon mentioned earlier, Irvad Hakimi, and he is down there. And they take him and put him down in the basement. So Oz shows up and sets up a plan for Victor to plant the stolen jewels in Vidi's red Mercedes. Oz approaches Vidi and Milos and claims they're hiding one of Maronis' lieutenants in the basement. Meanwhile, Sofia awkwardly walks around the wake and runs into her cousin, Isabella, played by Jenny Heaton. I thought this was Alexandra Palladino from Boardwalk Empire, but it's Jenny Heaton. And her young daughter, Gia, who may or may not be a woman who takes over the Falcone Empire in the future. I don't know. Outside, Victor is caught breaking into Vidi's car, runs away. Milos berates Castillo for keeping Irvad's kidnapping a secret. And the Penguin wakes Irvad up and tells him to talk about Johnny Vidi, but then gets a call from Victor telling him that he couldn't plant the jewels. So Oz, as Michael said, thinking on his feet, kills Irvad with the knife brutally. As Luca is reprimanding Sofia for kidnapping Irvad, they walk in and they find Irvad dead. and Luca demands that everyone responsible drops heads upstairs. They throw in Oz there with the rest of everybody. He sees Vidi come in. He hears they're looking for a knife, stages a fight with Vidi as Castillo breaks them up. He plants the knife on Castillo, and Castillo tries to beg for his innocence because, of course, he's a day player. He's going to get killed. It's not going to be Michael Kelly. Sofia is prepared to kill her own bodyguard, but Luca does it instead, which infuriates Sofia, causing Luca to tell her that she needs to leave Gotham and head to Italy. Later that night, Oz and Victor have that interaction I was talking about by the grave, which is pretty toxic, codependent. And then Oz gets a call from Sofia, goes over to meet her at the mausoleum, in essence, the family tomb, and enlists him to help her take over the Falcone Empire. So a lot in there, Michael. But what are your thoughts on these scenes at the Falcones estate, the relationship with Victor, and then Sofia at the end, enlisting Oz to help her take over Falcone?
Well, the whole scene with his mom is just... It's we already touched on it earlier, but it's just such a fascinating relationship because it does, again, if it was a lesser show, you would be like, oh, this is where we see the nicer side of Oz, or this is where we see the abusive side of the mom. But like to do both together is what makes it super complicated. Like we do see that Oz has his mom out here. He's looking out for her. He is protective. He has a sweetness in the way he deals with her, but also she's the reason he is the way he is. I mean, this whole, like, I need you to get me out of this place. I thought and he's like, you just got to hold on a little bit more. And she's like, I'm going to die waiting for you to become something. Like, it's just fucking brutal. Now, when you get to the funeral scene, a couple things. One, I do think it's cool that, like, they've really kept alive the fact that, like, people are pissed that Sofia is out of Arkham.
Yeah.
Like, she's a serial killer. Now, in the comic books, the Hangman killed people that fucked with the Falcone family and were kind of responsible for Alberto being caught, and like it was very focused on that. Whereas here they've sort of shifted it to, when we don't know the full story, I think we will get this version of it later on. What led Sofia to just go kill a bunch of women? Like, why did she, what made her go down this road? Because they kept the Hangman, they kept that she was a serial killer, they kept that she's in Arkham, they just changed a lot of the details around it. Which is really interesting. But even when you cut to that first shot of her where she's sort of off on her own, the fact that she's in the like that hallway of the church before you go in with like the bars. So the first thing we see, the shot of her, we see the protesters and we see her smoking behind bars, which I thought was a really, really cool shot. Now, again, Oz comes up to her, and in the same way, I think it'd be interesting to go through after the show's done and only listen to the Oz soliloquies.
Yeah.
Because I think if you do, you'll get at least Oz's version of how he came to become the guy he became. So like, even when he's talking to Victor earlier and he's doing that whole speech about, I was a driver for this guy, he really saw something in me, but then he was talking to the feds and so he got popped, but Carmine saw that there was something special about me. I believe that he killed the guy. I believe as the driver, he shot the guy for Falcone. And so you're like, ooh, and then Victor's his driver. Like, where is this relationship going? And then similarly, in this conversation that he has with Sofia, which is one of the first times that she's been so dismissive of him at every turn. And this is the first moment when he talks to her and tells this story where she's like, so you and your mom danced? Which is a little bit like, what the fuck are you talking about? But she actually listened.
Yeah.
But he talks about the death of his brothers, Jack and Benny.
Jack Benny. I mean, that's just
Jack Benny, clearly. He talks about Jack Benny and how the death of his older brothers devastated his mom and this whole thing. And I'm sitting here the whole time being like, did your brothers make fun of you? Did you kill those brothers? Like, I'm pretty sure you killed the brothers and your mom was devastated, and then you were there for her and be like, whoever did this needs to be held responsible. So again, all of his stories, and like you said, John, and then kind of capping it off with, she died a couple years ago, so I never got to ask her. And I'm like, bitch, we just saw her. So that was all really, really, really interesting. And then, yeah, his whole hyping Vic up as they pull up. He's like, by the way, you got to go plant these jewels. And he's like, oh, and he's like, it's going to be great. You feel alive, right? Yeah, let's keep that heart beating. And then hops out of the car.
Of course.
It's like, ugh. But yeah, this whole scene of him sort of trying to navigate, I got to go get this guy. I'm going to try and help him out because the Maronis are like, we want our guy back. Victor's going to plant the things in Vidi's car. And he's got a whole plan, and it looks like it's working. And then when it all falls apart, and even like the way he works it, like walking up to Vidi and the other guy and going like, yeah, just stand here. I already know.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, I know you got a body down there. You should have told me. I'm kind of pissed. Walks off. I'm like, this guy's fucking brilliant in the moment. He should be a groundling. Like, he's great at the yes and. But then, yeah, watching him down there and Victor runs away and he kind of realizes this part's not going to work and just like knifes the guy. And then again, in a lesser show, he would have gone after Vidi and been like, this is you, and planted the knife on Vidi. Right. And it would have been like, oh, it's Vidi. But like, that was so obvious.
Yeah.
Like him going and running at Vidi, and then Vidi has a knife in his pocket. Anybody could be like, wait a minute. What the fuck is this, Oz? What are you doing? But letting Vidi kind of sit there for a minute and going, oh, I'm getting rid of Castillo. So like he's sort of on the list. He's like, all right, I'll get to Vidi later, but I can take this guy out right now. And it's going to, and I don't know if he even thinks it far enough in advance to go, that isolates Sofia.
Yeah.
I don't even think he actually thought in terms of like, oh, I'm going to do this because then this will work for me. I think he's like, this motherfucker, this is my moment. But it does ultimately work for him because now Sofia is even more isolated. And the conversation that she has with Luca really just makes her go like, these fucking people are never going to listen to me.
Yeah.
And so then when they're down there at the graves, it's like she doesn't have Castillo anymore. Her family has basically turned their back on her and been like, get the fuck out of here and go to Italy. We don't want you here. Oz is the only one that has shown her any level of kindness. And even though she doesn't fully trust him, it's like in this moment, it's like, this is all I've got.
Mm-hmm.
And then Oz is there and he's ready. And so now we've got these two people that are both very volatile in their own ways, working together for these drugs. Also, just in Oz's brilliance, the jewels that Victor was supposed to plant on Vidi's car, getting them like thinking in the moment, being like, all right, now go put those in Castillo's apartment.
Yeah.
Like really, really great. And then the scene with him and Victor in the grave, like, yeah, look, man, this is the dynamic that they're living. But I think more so, even though there's an element, Johnny, what you said about Oz sort of living out the generational trauma of his mom, I think we're also watching him act out the generational trauma of how he became who he became.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, like
100%.
He was a guy who had a deformity.
Right.
And somebody saw this kid with a deformity that was being made fun of and said, I'm going to mold you into a monster, and did. Right. And he saw Victor with that stutter, and the things that he's doing to him, the lay down in his grave. Do you like this? Is this where you want to be? Because this is where you're going to end up. I could do this at any moment, but you got to get your fucking shit together. Like, he's building Victor. This is where I don't think Victor's putting on any superhero tights anytime soon. I think Victor's either going to try and kill Oz by the end of this series, will kill Oz by the end of this series, or will get killed by the end of this series because he thinks he's going to go down the road Oz is, and he's like, hey, kid, you're not as good as me, and cap him in the face. This is a very not great dynamic, but also a fascinating dynamic to watch.
Absolutely. Shannon, your thoughts on the scene with his mom, the stuff going on at the Falcones estate, and then at the end there was Sofia and Oz.
Vogel kind of covered a lot of the story stuff, so I'll just focus on the acting. The actor who's playing the landlord, yes. This show really succeeds on the backs of its day players. Yep. I mean, it's a really funny joke in Deadpool and Wolverine, like, death by day player. But if you have bad day players, the show can buckle.
Yep.
And these people, these actors, they're imbuing their characters with such life. I even think back to the bartender with the detective Marcus. Marcus Wise.
Marcus Wise, yeah.
That bartender being like, I've got nothing. Talking to the Riddler. Like, there's so much history and life in those deliveries, and very much with this landlord. Like, you can tell. Like, we learned in the Batman, Oz speaks Spanish. Oz speaks really good Spanish, and so this is not the first time they've had this conversation. Mm-hmm. And watching the landlord, one, as he says good luck to Vic, but also as he says to Oz's mom, God bless you. And her, thanks a lot. I mean, there's just so much history in all these performers. The one Falcone guy, Milosh.
That
That guy was one of the Lost Boys in Hook.
Yes, that was his first movie, Hook. Yep.
It is so wild to see him with a gray beard and this salt and pepper hair. I was like, oh my gosh, the last time I saw you, you were throwing food at Robin Williams. But again, the all of the performers are just so good, and watching the detective when he brings Ervod, the sort of childlike presentation of look what I did. I got it. Where are my drugs?
My drops.
You know,
Give him my drops.
He wants his reward for doing this thing that he did really well. Again, the scene with Colin Farrell and Cristin Milioti, where he does talk about his brothers. Just a masterclass. I mean, the way that Colin Farrell is able to use those prosthetics, everything to his advantage. Like, everything just looks so real, so believable. And even though, like, yes, he wants to take Johnny Vitti out, like, that's the guy, that's the direct domino, but he also still has an axe to grind with Castillo, because he is the guy that almost killed him, granted under Sofia's orders. But again, going back to the beginning of the episode, when he says Castillo, like, he is ready to shoot this guy, like, oh, not now, I'll get you later. So knowing that Castillo is the one, like, I hadn't even thought about isolating Sofia, but the fact that it's like, all right, I'm gonna get you when the time is right, and it's like, all right, time's right. I can get you out of the way. I can get her on my side. It's just so well written. And yeah, that moment where he makes Vic get into the grave with these two dead bodies. I mean, that's why I think, going back to the first episode, I'm like, I don't think he ever intended to kill Vic at the docks. Like, I think he was like, I might be able to use this kid.
Yeah.
And he is putting the fear of God in him, that it's like, I am your only friend. I am the only one who can help you. I'm the only one that's keeping this from happening. It's just fascinating to watch. And Rhenzy Feliz is doing a great job. And again, I'm going to be real sad when Oz kills him at the end.
You guys are both insane. He's going to be a superhero. I'm telling you.
I do think, just what you said, Shannon, and it really does strike me. And I think it is like, to the whether or not he was going to kill Victor in the end of the first episode, or in the first episode, I think this is what's fascinating, is because, again, getting back to what John and I were talking about last week, it's like, I think that when he met Victor, I think both things were existing at the same time in his head. I think he was planning on killing him when the deed was done. But at the other side of his head, he was like, unless there's a way I can use this. And I don't think either. I think what makes the show interesting, and hopefully what continues to happen, is that's what's constantly happening.
Yeah.
Is he's like, I could do this thing right now, but if I don't, what else can I do with it? And both things are moving at the same time, and you never quite know which one is going to win out in the moment. And I think that's what actually makes it interesting. So I think the whole, did he plan on killing Victor, or did he plan on using him the whole time, is almost like, I don't think either of those things is strictly speaking true. And I think the show is specifically writing a character that makes it so impossible for us to tell that that's what his superpower kind of is. Yeah,
because he doesn't hesitate killing Victor until Victor starts to stutter. And so there's something there. So in the moment, he might have intended to kill Victor, but then this happened and it changed his plans, because, again, he's just a guy who's adept at thinking on his feet and then figuring it out later what he's going to do in this whole situation. Yeah, the scene with his mom, I mean, as you said, Shannon, Deidre O'Connell, just really great stuff. But I also think it's essential. I saw some reviewers saying, like, I don't understand these scenes with his mom. And I was like, how can you? This is supposed to humanize him. This is supposed to give you some kind of connection with somebody who's coming from a clearly traumatic childhood and upbringing, from a woman who probably hated him and hated her having her kids, probably didn't even want to have kids, but had to raise them. And so you get a window into why he is the way he is and how this led to his world to becoming a criminal. It doesn't mean that everybody comes from that becomes criminals, but you can make the connection here, which I think is super important to have those scenes. And he clearly loves his mom. So you see this other side of Oz that legitimately does care for someone that he does not want to kill, which is his mother. So you get a little bit more of a window into him. So I love those scenes and the tenderness, which is always mixed in with the emotional blackmail that she plays on him all the time, that I think is devastating to witness when it happens. The stuff with Sofia and him, I mean, that final scene between them is fantastic. The scene in the church, you're right, Mike, she finally breaks down a little bit. And that's the gift of great actors, as Shannon was pointing out. It's those little quiet moments. The listening acting is so important, and seeing both of them when they have those quiet listening moments are so fun to see, and see them flesh out their characters more in their relationship more. So you buy it by the end that she would.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that she fully accepts Oz and is like, okay, now we're Team Sofia and Oz. It's more like, okay, I don't have Castillo. Everybody's abandoned me. All right, I'm going to use you for now. And both of them are going to use each other until the final confrontation, probably in the last episode or second last episode. So it'll be interesting to see. And the Victor thing, just keep a tab on all of that, I think. All right, anything more to say on this? Are we good to go to wrap up? Anything more? You guys want any last final word?
It's a great ride. It's a great ride, and to me, it feels very Batman in the ways of a lot of the Batman comics that I really love. But also at the same time, like, this is Oz's story, and I think that really fleshing him out as a character is fascinating. And in the same way that we're talking about how we never quite know what he's going to do as a character, the show, you kind of don't quite know where it's going to go next. It's like, it's just wild. So I'm really enjoying the ride a lot.
Agreed. All right, well, there you go. That's our spoiler review for episode 2 of The Penguin Inside Man here. Thank you so much for watching or listening to us. Shannon, what do we have to tell them?
Yeah, if you'd like to follow us on social media, on Twitter, it's at geek_buddies, on Instagram at _geek_buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy. Also, the last episode of Dream Sequence comes out today from iHeart Podcast, Realm, and Blumhouse. If you'd like to follow Mr. Vogel, it is at MKToon. If you'd like to follow Mr. Rocha, it is at The Rocha Says.
Mikey?
Smash that like button, subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page, leave your comments below. What do you think of the Penguin? Where do you think things are going? If you're listening to us on a podcast, leave us some stars and comments so we'll go up in the rankings there. And as always, the best thing you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
There you go. Thank you all so much. And look for our main show coming up later on, and our Agatha all-along review coming up later on this week as well. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review here on a special episode of the Geek Bites, brought to you by the
Geek
Buddies.
Hey!